The Last Orchardist. A novel of the American heartland. In the tradition of the quiet farmer. Prologue. What a tree remembers. A fruit tree does not choose its location. This is the first constraint that an orchardist works within, and it shapes everything that follows: the variety selection, the training system, the harvest timing, the entire management philosophy of the orchard, because a tree that is planted in the wrong place will spend its productive life compensating for a mismatch that cannot be undone. The right place is not a simple concept. It is not merely the right soil or the right rainfall or the right average temperature. It is the right microclimate, the specific combination of frost timing and cold accumulation and summer heat and drainage and aspect and airflow that determines, for any given variety, whether the tree will produce the consistent, high-quality fruit that an orchard requires to be economically viable. In the Hood River Valley of Oregon, where the Columbia River Gorge cuts through the Cascade Range and creates one of the most complex microclimatic landscapes in North America, the right place varies by elevation, by aspect, by proximity to the river, and by the specific patterns of cold air drainage that the valley's topography produces. A block of trees planted on a south-facing slope at 600 feet elevation will accumulate chilling hours differently from a block planted on a north-facing bench at 800 feet, 3 miles away. The difference of 200 feet in elevation and a change of aspect can mean the difference between a variety that performs consistently and a variety that fails every third year when the spring frost arrives after the bloom has already opened. This is knowledge that the official extension guidelines cannot fully contain. It is knowledge that lives in the orchardist, in the specific person who has been walking these specific blocks for long enough to know what each block does in each kind of year. Marcus Webb had been walking his orchard blocks in the Hood River Valley for 47 years. He was 73 years old in the spring of 2019, and his orchard, 240 acres of pear, apple, and cherry on the east side of the valley where the glacially deposited soils and the specific cold air drainage pattern of the underwood bench had been producing premium fruit since his grandfather planted the first blocks in 1924, was one of the last heirloom pear operations in commercial production in the valley. The Extension Service had told him, 3 years running, that the climate projections for the Hood River Valley suggested his heirloom pear varieties would become increasingly unviable as the valley warmed. The chilling hours those varieties required, the hours below 45 degrees Fahrenheit that triggered proper dormancy break, were projected to fall below the minimum threshold within 10 to 15 years. Marcus had read the projections. He had also been reading the cold air drainage patterns on his specific bench for 47 years. The projections in the reading were not saying the same thing. This is the story of what the projections said, and what Marcus knew, and what happened when both were tested in the spring that neither the model nor the man had quite anticipated. Part 1, The Orchard. Chapter 1, Hood River Valley, Oregon, March 2019. Marcus Webb drove the upper bench of his orchard on the first clear morning of March 2019 in the way he drove his orchard every first clear morning of March, slowly, in the diesel pickup that had 190,000 miles on it and that he kept because it started in cold weather and because he could fix it himself, stopping at each block to look at the bud development and to note what he saw. He was 73 years old, built in the spare and weathered way of a man who has spent 5 decades in an orchard landscape, with hands that were permanently stained at the knuckles from years of contact with fruit and bark and the copper-based sprays that were the foundation of pear disease management. He wore a canvas jacket and work boots and a wool cap that he had been wearing in March for 20 years, since the winter his wife had given it to him and since he had discovered that it was exactly the right weight for the specific cold of Hood River Valley March mornings. The orchard in March was not what it would be in August. In March it was dormant wood and bare soil and the specific gray-brown of fruit trees in the period between winter cold and spring growth, when the buds had not yet revealed what the season would hold. An orchardist who could not read the bud stage was reading a foreign language. Marcus read it the way he read everything in this orchard, as information specific to this place, in this year, against the reference library of 47 springs. He stopped at the Bosque block first. The Bosque pear was his most sensitive variety, the one whose chilling requirements were closest to the projected threshold, the one that the Extension Service had been flagging in its climate advisories for the past 3 years. The Bosque needed a minimum of 900 to 1,000 hours below 45 degrees Fahrenheit for proper dormancy break and uniform flowering. Below that threshold, the blooming would be erratic, some buds opening early, some late, some failing entirely, producing the uneven fruit set that made commercial production unreliable. He looked at the bud stage on the first tree in the block. Then he walked to the thermocouple station he had installed at the block's lower edge in 1987, the year the Extension Service had first started talking about chilling hour requirements and the year Marcus had decided he needed his own data rather than the weather station data from the valley floor. The thermocouple station recorded temperature continuously and calculated cumulative chilling hours at the block level. He had 32 years of continuous chilling hour data for this specific block. The current season's accumulated chilling hours, 847. The extension service's projected minimum threshold for Bosk, 900 to 1,000 hours. He was 53 hours short of the lower threshold, and the chilling season was effectively over. The March temperatures were no longer cold enough to accumulate meaningful additional hours. By the valley floor weather station data, the data the extension models used, the chilling hour accumulation for the season was 731. 30% below Marcus's thermocouple reading. The difference was the cold air drainage. The Underwood bench, at 780 feet elevation, collected cold air that drained off the slopes above it during the radiation cooling events that the clear, calm nights of late fall and winter produced. The cold air, being denser than the warmer air above, flowed down the slopes and pooled in the lower portions of the bench before continuing to the valley floor. On a still, clear winter night, the bench could be 8 to 12 degrees colder than the valley floor 3 miles away and 400 feet below. The valley floor weather station did not record this. The extension models used the valley floor data. Marcus's thermocouple recorded it every 15 minutes. He noted the reading in his notebook and walked back to the truck. Chapter 2, What His Grandfather Built. Harold Webb had planted the first orchard blocks on the Underwood bench in 1924, at the age of 31, with money borrowed from his wife's family and with the specific conviction of a man who had studied the valley's fruit production for 3 years before planting and who believed he had found something that the established growers in the valley's prime producing areas had overlooked. What Harold had found was the bench. The established orchards in 1924 were concentrated in the valley's lower elevations, the rich, deep soils of the valley floor and the gentle lower slopes that were easily irrigated from the Hood River's tributaries and that had been producing commercial pears since the 1890s. These orchards were excellent and well situated. They were also, Harold had observed, subject to late spring frost events that were more severe than on the benches above them because cold air drained off the upper slopes and settled in the lower elevation areas. The bench at 780 feet was above most of the cold air pooling that afflicted the lower orchards. It also had the specific aspect and exposure that Harold had concluded, from 3 years of watching the valley's microclimates, would give it a slightly longer chilling period in winter and a slightly later spring warming, both favorable for the heirloom pear varieties that needed the chilling hours and that bloomed early enough to be at risk from late frost. Harold had been right. He had planted Bosk, Anjou, Camise, and Seckel, the 4 heirloom varieties that were the foundation of Hood River Valley premium pear production, and had added Bartlett in the lower blocks where the soil was deeper and the spring warming came earlier. He had planted apple blocks in the upper bench positions where the summer heat accumulation was sufficient for apple maturation and where the slope provided the natural drainage that apple trees required. He had maintained the orchard for 31 years, from 1924 to 1955, and in that time he had built the specific understanding of the bench's behavior that the orchard required, the block-by-block knowledge of which positions had the most reliable chilling accumulation, which positions were most vulnerable to late frost, which soil types required what irrigation timing. His son Robert had continued. Robert had run the orchard from 1955 to 1972, adding the thermocouple monitoring that gave the family's empirical observations a quantitative basis and continuing the block-level management philosophy that Harold had established. Marcus had taken over at 26, in 1972, and had been running the orchard ever since. In 1972, he had known what his grandfather had taught his father and what his father had taught him. The bench behaved differently from the valley floor, and the behavior was the reason the heirloom varieties were possible here when they had become unreliable on the valley floor. In 2019, he knew the same thing with 47 years of additional data. Chapter 3, The Extension Advisor. Her name was Dr. Patricia Alvarez, and she was 42 years old and had been the OSU Extension Fruit Production Advisor for Hood River County for 4 years, coming from a position at the Pacific Northwest Research Station where she had worked on climate adaptation strategies for Pacific Northwest tree fruit production. She was knowledgeable and genuinely committed to helping the valley's growers navigate the climate changes that were affecting production, and her concern about the heirloom pear varieties was real and based on legitimate data. The climate projections she worked from were the IPCC scenarios interpreted through the PNW Climate Toolbox, which used a network of valley weather stations to project future temperature and precipitation patterns. The projections showed warming. The warming was real. The valley's mean annual temperature had increased by approximately 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1980. The chilling hour accumulation calculated from the valley floor weather stations had declined by approximately 85 hours over the same period. Patricia had been advising the valley's pear growers to consider transitioning to low-chill varieties, newer cultivars developed specifically for the warmer conditions that climate change was producing, for 3 consecutive years. The transitions made economic and agronomic sense for most of the valley's producers, whose orchards were at lower elevations where the chilling decline was most pronounced. She had visited Marcus's operation in each of the 3 years she had been making this recommendation, and in each visit she had encountered the same respectful but firm resistance. Marcus had shown her his thermocouple data each time. She had looked at it carefully. She understood what it showed, that the Underwood bench's cold air drainage gave it a significant chilling advantage over the valley floor. But the IPCC projections were for the whole valley, including the bench. Even if the bench started from a higher baseline, the warming trend would eventually push it below the threshold too. The trend is real, she had said, in the 3rd visit. Even with the cold air drainage advantage, the trajectory crosses the threshold. In my thermocouple data or in the model data? Marcus had said. In the model data, she had said. My thermocouple shows a different trend, he had said. The thermocouple covers 32 years, she had said. The model projections extend to 2050. The 32 years of local data are consistent with the model's baseline. The divergence is in the projection period. The projection period uses the valley floor trend extrapolated to the bench, he had said. The valley floor trend is the best available data for a valley-wide projection, she had said. It may not be the best available data for a bench-specific projection, he had said. She had not had a ready answer to this. It was, she acknowledged, a legitimate methodological question, whether valley floor temperature trends were an accurate proxy for bench-specific temperature trends, given the cold air drainage dynamic. She had driven back to the extension office with the question unresolved. Chapter 4, The Climate Meeting. The Hood River County Fruit Growers Association held its annual climate adaptation meeting in the 2nd week of February 2019, at the Grange Hall in Odell, and the meeting was attended by approximately 80 growers and the extension team and 2 climate scientists from Oregon State who presented the most current climate projections for the valley. Marcus was in the back of the room, in the seat he always took at county meetings, far enough back to see the whole room, close enough to hear without difficulty. The lead climate scientist, a professor from the OSU College of Agricultural Sciences named Dr. James Reardon, presented the projections with the specific thoroughness of someone who understood both the science and the audience. The projections showed the expected continued warming, the expected decline in chilling hour accumulation, and the expected shift in bloom timing that would increase late frost risk for early blooming varieties. The presentation was accurate. The data behind it was solid. The methodology was transparent. During the question period, a grower in the 4th row asked about variety-specific thresholds. At what point did specific varieties cross the viability line? Dr. Reardon showed the threshold chart. Bosc, 900 to 1,000 hours, projected to fall below minimum threshold at the valley floor between 2028 and 2035 under the median scenario. Camise, similar. Anjou, slightly lower threshold, slightly longer viable window. Marcus raised his hand. The projections use valley floor weather station data, he said. How do the projections account for within-valley microclimate variation, specifically cold air drainage dynamics at higher elevation bench positions? Dr. Reardon looked at him. The projections are based on the valley network of weather stations, he said. The network provides good spatial coverage of the valley's primary production areas. Microclimate variation at the subfield scale is not captured at this resolution. My thermocouple data for the Underwood bench shows a 116-hour average advantage over the valley floor and chilling accumulation, based on 32 years of continuous data, Marcus said. That advantage is not reflected in the projections. A 116-hour advantage would push the threshold crossing approximately 5 to 8 years further into the future, Dr. Reardon said, doing the calculation quickly. That's significant for planning purposes. Do you have the data in a form that could be incorporated into a bench-specific projection? I have 32 years of 15-minute interval thermocouple data for 4 blocks on the bench, Marcus said. Formatted in the OSU standard logging format. I'd like to see it, Dr. Reardon said. Patricia Alvarez, in the front row, wrote something in her notebook. She did not show what she wrote to anyone around her. After the meeting, she found Marcus at his truck. The thermocouple data, she said. I've seen it in each of my 3 visits. I should have sent it to the climate modeling team earlier. No, Marcus said. You should have asked. She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. I should have asked. Chapter 5, Clara Webb. Clara Webb had been married to Marcus for 49 years and had managed the orchard's financial records and marketing operations since they were married, because Marcus was better with trees than with numbers and because Clara had a business degree from Portland State that she had put to consistent use in the specific context of a fruit farm operation. She had been tracking the operation's performance with the precision of someone who understood that the financial records were the only systematic documentation of what the orchard produced and what it cost to produce it, and she had been correlating the performance data with the chilling hour data from Marcus's thermocouple since 1994, when she had first noticed that the chilling hour accumulation correlated more strongly with block-specific yield and quality than the weather station data did. In the spring of 2019, she was thinking about the climate meeting and about what it implied for the operation. She was 68 years old and had been watching the valley's orchard economics long enough to understand the forces that were reshaping it. The valley had lost approximately 40% of its heirloom pear acreage in the past 15 years, as growers had converted to lower chill varieties, to apples, to cherries, and in some cases to wine grapes, the crop that had become the valley's glamour product as the wine industry expanded and as the premium pear market contracted. The Webb orchard was one of the few remaining operations still committed to heirloom varieties at scale. Clara had a number in her head that she had been calculating since 2016, when the Extension Service had first started making the variety conversion recommendations. The number was the cumulative premium that the Webb orchard received for its heirloom pears over the commodity price for the low-chill varieties that the Extension Service was recommending. The premium was real and significant. The heirloom varieties, Bosc, Camise, Seckel, particularly, commanded prices in the premium fresh market that the low-chill varieties could not match. The buyers who paid those prices were specific buyers, the specialty grocery chains, the restaurant wholesalers, the direct-to-consumer programs that Clara had been building for 15 years and that were now generating approximately 35% of the operation's revenue at margins significantly above the commodity channel. If the heirloom varieties became non-viable, the premium went away. What replaced it was commodity production of crops that every other grower in the valley was also producing, a position in a competitive market that the Webb operation's scale and structure was not designed to occupy profitably. She had been watching Marcus's thermocouple data for 25 years. She had been following the climate projections for 3 years. She understood the disagreement between them, and she understood why it mattered. She sat with Marcus on the evening after the climate meeting and did the calculation she had been building toward. The thermocouple data project's threshold crossing approximately 5 to 8 years later than the valley floor model, she said. Which means the viable window for the heirloom varieties, on our specific bench, is meaningfully longer than the recommendation implies. Yes, Marcus said. The question is what we do with the additional window, she said. Do we maintain the current operation and accept the eventual transition? Or do we use the window to build something that outlasts the window? What would outlast the window? Marcus said. Varieties that need fewer chilling hours than the heirlooms, she said. But premium varieties, not commodity low chill. There are new Anjou crosses and Bosc-type varieties being developed that have lower chilling requirements while maintaining the fruit characteristics that justify the premium. I've been watching those trials, Marcus said. The question is whether we plant them now, while we have the financial stability to support a 5-year establishment period, she said. Or wait until the heirlooms fail and plant them then, without the financial stability. Plant them now, Marcus said. In the lower blocks, where the chilling advantage is smallest and where the transition will come first. That's what I thought you'd say, Clara said. She had already prepared the block analysis. She showed it to him. He read it. He nodded. We have time, he said. More time than the model shows. Not unlimited time. Use the time we have, Clara said. Part 2, The Frost. Chapter 6, The 2019 Spring. The spring of 2019 arrived in the Hood River Valley in the specific way that springs arrived in complex microclimatic landscapes, not uniformly, but in the differentiated pattern that reflected the valley's topographic variation. On the valley floor, the warming came first. The lower elevations left winter in early March, the soil temperatures rising, the bud development on the valley floor orchards advancing through the phenological stages at the standard rate. On the Underwood bench, the warming came later. This was expected. The bench's cold air drainage, which provided the chilling advantage in winter, meant that spring warming was slower and more gradual. The bloom timing on the bench was typically 5 to 10 days later than on the valley floor, which was one of the reasons the late frost risk was lower. The bloom occurred after the period of most intense late frost risk had passed. Marcus tracked the bud development on all of his blocks through March and into April, the way he tracked it every year, recording the phenological stage for each block at 3-day intervals. Green tip, half-inch green, tight cluster, pink, bloom. He also tracked the cold air drainage events. On still, clear nights, when the temperature inversion was strong and the cold air flowed off the upper slopes and pooled on the bench, he recorded the minimum temperature at each of his 4 thermocouple stations and noted the difference between the bench temperature and the valley floor weather station reading. In the third week of April 2019, as the boss block on the upper bench was approaching pink stage, approximately 5 days from full bloom, the Weather Service issued a frost advisory for the Hood River Valley for the night of April 24. The frost advisory predicted minimum temperatures of 32 degrees at the valley floor. Marcus looked at the advisory and then at his thermocouple stations and then at the sky. The sky on the afternoon of April 23 was clear. The wind was calm. The conditions were precisely the conditions that produced strong cold air drainage events. He did not think the frost temperature on his bench would be 32 degrees. He thought it would be colder. Chapter 7, Reading the Night. Marcus sat in the kitchen at 11 p.m. on April 23 with his notebook and his phone, tracking the temperature readings from his thermocouple stations as the clear, calm night cooled. The valley floor weather station at 11 p.m., 40 degrees. His thermocouple at the lower bench, 680 feet, 38 degrees. His thermocouple at the middle bench, 740 feet, 36 degrees. His thermocouple at the upper bench, 780 feet, 35 degrees. Already 5 degrees colder on the upper bench than on the valley floor. He watched the cooling rate. The temperature was dropping at approximately 1.5 degrees per hour on the valley floor, which was the normal radiation cooling rate for a clear, calm night in April. On the bench, the rate was faster, the cold air from the upper slopes was flowing down and cooling, creating additional cooling on top of the radiation cooling. At midnight, he called Clara. "I'm activating the wind machines," he said. The orchard's frost protection system consisted of wind machines, large propeller units mounted on towers in the orchard blocks that mixed the temperature inversion layer, bringing the warmer air from above down into the orchard and preventing the coldest air from settling at tree height. The machines required fuel to run and activated at a cost, and the decision to activate was always a judgment call. Too early, and you ran the machines through a night that didn't need them. Too late, and the damage was already done. "The forecast says 32 at the valley floor," Clara said. "My upper bench thermocouple is already at 35 at midnight," Marcus said. "We have 3 hours until the coldest part of the night. If the cooling rate holds, we'll be at 26 to 28 on the upper bench by 3 a.m. "The boss block is at pink stage," Clara said. "I know," he said. "Pink is tolerant to 28 degrees. I think we'll be at 26. I'm activating." The wind machines came on at 12:15 a.m. By 3 a.m., the valley floor weather station read 31 degrees. The frost advisory had been accurate for the valley floor. Marcus's upper bench thermocouple at 3 a.m., 27 degrees without the wind machines running would have been his estimate. With the wind machines running and mixing the inversion layer, the actual temperature at tree height was 30 degrees, above the damage threshold for pink stage bosk. He shut the wind machines down at 5 a.m. as the temperature began rising with the approaching dawn. He drove the upper bench at first light. The boss block, no damage. The wind machines had held the temperature above the critical threshold. The valley floor orchards below the bench, which had not had the cold air drainage effect and which had experienced the 31-degree minimum that the forecast had predicted, no damage either. The valley floor had stayed above 32. Marcus looked at the upper bench and thought about what 27 degrees without protection would have meant for a boss block at pink stage. He noted in his notebook, April 24 frost event. Valley floor min, 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Upper bench thermocouple, without mixing, estimated 27 degrees Fahrenheit based on 3 a.m. reading with machines running and mixing correction. Machines activated at 12:15 a.m. based on cooling rate projection. Block protected. Damage threshold, 28 degrees Fahrenheit for pink stage. Margin, 1 degree Fahrenheit. 1 degree. The management decision that had saved the crop had been made with a 1-degree margin, based on a cooling rate projection made from thermocouple data at midnight, against a forecast that had correctly predicted the valley floor temperature but had not captured the bench-specific cold air drainage that made the upper bench 4 to 5 degrees colder. Chapter 8, Patricia Alvarez's Morning. Patricia Alvarez drove through the valley on the morning of April 24, doing her standard post-frost assessment of the orchards she advised. The valley floor orchards were fine. The frost advisory had been accurate, and at 31 degrees, the damage to bloom stage varieties was minimal. Some early blooming cherries had taken light damage at the most exposed sites, but the primary crops were unaffected. She drove to the Underwood bench at the end of her circuit. Marcus was in the boss block when she arrived. She parked and walked to him. "How did you fare?" she said. "The block is clean," he said. He showed her his thermocouple reading from the night. The 3 a.m. reading with the wind machines running. She looked at the numbers. She calculated the without machine's temperature from the correction factor that Marcus had developed from his 32 years of inversion events. 27 degrees without protection, she said. "That's my estimate," he said. "The forecast was 32 at the valley floor," she said. "You were activating wind machines at midnight based on a projection that you'd be 4 to 5 degrees colder than the forecast. Based on the cooling rate in the inversion layer formation," he said. "The conditions at sunset were exactly what produces strong cold air drainage. The 32-degree forecast for the valley floor implied 26 to 28 degrees on the upper bench under those inversion conditions. How do you know what the 32-degree valley floor implies for the upper bench under specific inversion conditions?" she said. 32 years of side-by-side thermocouple data and valley floor weather station data, he said. "I have the relationship quantified. Not perfectly, the estimate last night was 27 degrees and the actual without machines was probably 26 to 28. But close enough to make the management decision correctly." She looked at the boss block. Clean trees. No frost damage. Pink stage buds intact. The valley floor growers who had early bloom blocks, she said. "What happened to them last night?" "The valley floor stayed above 32, he said. "They were fine." "So the forecast was accurate for them," she said. "The forecast was accurate for the valley floor," he said. "It was not accurate for my bench. The forecast and my reading agreed on the valley floor temperature. They disagreed about the bench temperature because the forecast doesn't model the cold air drainage." She was quiet for a moment. "You've been telling me this for 3 years, she said. "I've been telling you the thermocouple data shows a different picture from the model data," he said. "The frost event last night is the same difference, applied to a single night rather than to an annual chilling accumulation. The chilling hour projections use the same valley floor data," she said. "Yes," he said. "Which means the chilling projections for your bench are as far off as last night's frost forecast was for your bench," she said. "That's what I've been trying to say," he said. "For 3 years, she said. "For 3 years, he said." Part 3, The Data. Chapter 9, What Marcus Tracked. In May, as the orchard moved from bloom through fruit set and into the early development stages, Patricia Alvarez came back to the Webb orchard with a different purpose from her previous visits. She came to understand the thermocouple data system. Marcus walked her through it over 2 days: the station placement, the logging format, the calibration history, the 32-year archive. He showed her the Excel files that contained the raw data and the derived calculations, chilling hour accumulations, diurnal temperature ranges, inversion event frequency and magnitude, bloom timing records going back to 1987. "Bloom timing," she said. "You've been recording bloom timing for 32 years? "For each variety in each block," he said. "First flower open, 10% bloom, full bloom, petal fall. For all 4 blocks of each variety." "Why 4 blocks per variety?" she said. "Because the blocks at different positions on the bench bloom at different times," he said. "The lower boss block blooms 2 to 3 days before the upper boss block, because it warms faster in spring. The difference matters for frost risk management." "You manage each block on its own bloom schedule," she said. "I manage each block based on its own phenology," he said. "The frost risk management, the irrigation timing, the harvest timing, all of it is block specific." She was looking at the bloom timing records. 32 years of first flower open, 10% bloom, full bloom, and petal fall for 16 variety block combinations. "This is a significant dataset," she said. "It's what the farm requires to be managed correctly," he said. "Have you ever analyzed the trend in bloom timing?" she said. "For the climate shift signal?" "Clara has," he said. Clara showed her the analysis she had done in 2016. The bloom timing on the Webb orchard had advanced by an average of 3.2 days since 1987, earlier spring flowering, consistent with the warming trend. But the advance was not uniform across the bench. The lower blocks had advanced 4.1 days, the upper blocks had advanced 2.3 days. The difference was the cold air drainage. The upper bench was warming more slowly than the lower bench, consistent with the different chilling hour trajectories. "The upper bench is experiencing less warming than the lower bench," Patricia said. The cold air drainage is providing a partial buffer, Clara said. Not complete, the trend is still toward warming. But the rate is slower. And the chilling projections assume the same rate of change across the whole valley, Patricia said. The projections assume the valley floor rate, Clara said. Patricia looked at the bloom timing data. She looked at the thermocouple data. She thought about the frost advisory and the 27-degree reality behind the 32-degree forecast. If I run the chilling projections using your thermocouple data instead of the valley floor data, she said, and I use the block-specific warming rate from your bloom timing records, how does the threshold crossing date change? I did that calculation in 2017, Clara said. She showed her the calculation. The valley floor model, threshold crossing for Bosque in 2028 to 2035. The Webb bench thermocouple model, threshold crossing for the lower bench in 2031 to 2038. For the upper bench, 2035 to 2043. 7 to 8 years later for the lower bench. 10 to 12 years later for the upper bench. 10 to 12 years, Patricia said. For the upper bench, under the conservative projection, Clara said. That's a meaningful difference for operational planning. It's a meaningful difference for my recommendation, Patricia said. Chapter 10, The Valley Floor Orchards. In June and July, as the fruit was developing and the first sense of what the harvest would be began to take shape in the hanging clusters, Patricia Alvarez worked through the conversation she needed to have about what she had learned at the Webb orchard. She had been advising the valley's growers for 4 years, and in those 4 years she had made the variety conversion recommendation to approximately 30 operations. Most of them had accepted or were accepting the recommendation. The valley floor growers, for whom the chilling projections were most immediately applicable, had been converting steadily. What she had not done, until the spring of 2019, was ask whether the recommendation applied uniformly to all positions in the valley. The answer, she now understood, was no. The valley had significant microclimate heterogeneity. The bench positions, the Underwood bench where the Webb orchard sat, and 2 or 3 similar bench positions on the north side of the valley, had cold air drainage dynamics that gave them a chilling advantage over the valley floor. The magnitude of the advantage varied, but it was real and it was significant for planning horizons. She had been applying a valley-wide recommendation to a geographically differentiated landscape. The recommendation was correct on average. It was not correct for the specific positions where the cold air drainage provided a meaningful buffer. She drove the upper valley on a July morning, thinking about this, and stopped at a viewpoint on the bench road that gave her a view of the valley's agricultural landscape, the orchard blocks, the converted vineyard areas, the remaining heirloom pear operations visible by their size and structure. She counted 5 operations at bench positions similar to the Webb orchards. Of the 5, 3 had been converting to low-chill varieties on her recommendation over the past 4 years. The conversions were already in process, trees removed, new varieties planted, 5-year establishment underway. She thought about whether the conversions were right. The conversions were not necessarily wrong. The long-term trajectory was the same regardless of the starting position. The bench was warming, just more slowly than the valley floor. The growers who were converting were not making an error. They were responding to a real trend. But if the threshold crossing was 10 to 12 years later on the upper bench than the valley floor model showed, then the conversions were happening a decade before they needed to. The orchard revenue from the heirloom varieties, the premium that Clara Webb had been documenting for 25 years, was being surrendered a decade early. She picked up her phone and called Dr. Reardon at Oregon State. "The thermocouple data from the Webb operation," she said. "I'm sending it to you. I need you to run the bench-specific projection." Chapter 11, Clara's Accounting. Clara Webb sat at the kitchen table in August 2019 and did the accounting that she had been building toward since the climate meeting in February. The accounting was in 2 parts. The first part was the premium accounting, the financial value of the heirloom varieties over the commodity alternatives that the low-chill conversions would produce. She had been tracking the premium since 1994. The premium varied by year and by market conditions, but the average over 25 years was consistent. The Webb Orchard's heirloom varieties, primarily Bosque, Camise, and Seckel sold through the premium channel she had developed, generated approximately $0.32 per pound above the commodity price for the low-chill varieties that the Extension Service recommended. At the Webb Orchard's production level, approximately 2.1 million pounds of marketable fruit in a normal year, the annual premium was approximately $672 above commodity pricing. She noted this. Then she applied it to the planning horizon question. If the Extension Services Valley Floor model was correct, if the threshold crossing was in 2028 to 2035, then the Webb orchard had 9 to 16 years of premium production remaining before the variety conversion became agronomically necessary. If Marcus's bench-specific thermocouple model was correct, if the upper bench threshold crossing was in 2035 to 2043, then the orchard had 16 to 24 years of premium production remaining. The difference, 7 to 8 years of additional premium production on the upper bench. At $672,000 per year, $4.7 million to $5.4 million in additional premium revenue. She looked at this number for a long time. It was not a number from a single dramatic event. It was a number from the accumulated effect of 32 years of thermocouple data showing a difference that the Valley Floor model did not capture. The second part of the accounting was the investment question, what to do with the additional planning horizon that the bench-specific data provided. She had been developing this calculation since the conversation after the climate meeting. If the upper bench had 20 or more viable years for the heirloom varieties, the orchard could use that window to develop what she thought of as the transition strategy, planting the lower bench blocks, where the chilling advantage was smallest, with the new lower chill premium varieties that would eventually replace the heirlooms throughout the orchard. Establishing those new varieties over the next 5 to 10 years while the heirlooms were still producing at full premium. Building the relationships with the premium buyers for the new varieties while the Webb name still carried the premium reputation that 47 years of heirloom quality had built. The transition strategy required the planning horizon that the thermocouple data provided. It required knowing the difference between 9 years and 20 years. She showed the accounting to Marcus. He read it. He was quiet for a long time. The $4.7 million, he said. That's what the model was going to cost us. That's what the model was going to cost us if we had converted on the Extension Services timeline, she said. On the basis of data that wasn't specific to our position. Patricia came back in May, he said. She's been running the bench-specific projections with Reardon. I know, Clara said. She called me last week. What did she say? He said. She said the bench-specific projection extends the viable window by 10 to 12 years on the upper bench, consistent with what I calculated, Clara said. She also said she's been advising 3 other bench position operations on the same timeline as ours, and she's calling each of them to review the recommendation. 3 other operations, Marcus said. Already in conversion, Clara said. 2 to 3 years into their new plannings. Can they pause? Marcus said. They can adjust, Clara said. Not fully undo. But they can slow the conversion in the upper bench blocks and maintain the heirlooms longer than they'd planned. Marcus looked at the accounting on the table. He looked out the kitchen window at the orchard, the blocks of heirloom pears visible on the slope, the fruit hanging in the July heat, the landscape that his grandfather had chosen in 1924 and that the 3 subsequent generations had read, year by year, with increasing precision. Harold chose this bench in 1924 because it was different from the valley floor, Marcus said. The cold air drainage was part of why he chose it. The cold air drainage is why we're still here, Clara said. It's also why the model doesn't apply to us, Marcus said. Yes, Clara said. The model applies to the valley. We're in the valley. We're not in the average part of the valley. Part 4, What the Data Built. Chapter 12, Dr. Reardon's Analysis. The bench-specific climate projection that Patricia Alvarez commissioned from Dr. James Reardon and his team at Oregon State University was completed in October 2019 and submitted to the Hood River County Extension Service as a technical addendum to the existing valley-wide climate assessment. The analysis used the 32 years of thermocouple data from the Webb orchard, combined with the 4 bloom timing datasets and the historical inversion event records, to construct a bench-specific temperature model for the Underwood bench position. The model confirmed what Marcus and Clara had been calculating. The Underwood bench had a consistent 110 to 125 hour chilling advantage over the valley floor, driven by cold air drainage on radiation cooling events. The advantage had been slightly diminishing over the 32-year period, consistent with the valley-wide warming trend, but at a rate approximately 40% slower than the valley floor warming rate. The projected threshold crossing under the bench-specific model, 2033 to 2041 for the lower bench blocks, 2038 to 2047 for the upper bench blocks. The OSU analysis also identified 3 additional bench positions in the valley with similar cold air drainage characteristics, and recommended that thermocouple monitoring be established at these positions to develop the site-specific data that would allow accurate planning projections for the growers at those positions. Patricia submitted the addendum to the Extension Services Regional Director in November. The regional director's response was measured, the addendum was scientifically sound, the bench-specific projection methodology was appropriate, and the Extension Service would incorporate the findings into its variety management recommendations for bench position orchards. Patricia called Marcus when the addendum was accepted. The official recommendation is updated, she said. Bench position orchards with documented cold air drainage will receive a site-specific assessment rather than the valley-wide projection. How many bench position orchards are there? Marcus said. 12 with similar cold air drainage characteristics, she said. Of those, 5 are still in heirloom production. 7 have converted, at least partially. The 7 that converted, Marcus said. On my timeline or before. 3 converted on my recommendation, which was based on the valley floor model, Patricia said. Those 3 converted earlier than the site-specific data would have recommended. How much earlier? Marcus said. 8 to 12 years, she said. That's the premium window, Marcus said. Yes, she said. I know. She was quiet for a moment. I'm writing up the methodology for the site-specific assessment, she said. The thermocouple placement, the bloom timing documentation, the inversion event recording. I want growers at bench positions elsewhere in the region, not just Hood River, to have the protocol to collect the data that allows a site-specific projection. It would have helped if the protocol had existed 30 years ago, Marcus said. It would have, she said. But the data that makes the protocol credible is the 32 years of data you collected without the protocol. My grandfather chose this bench for the cold air drainage, Marcus said. He didn't have a thermocouple. He had 4 years of watching the valley. And then your father added the thermocouple, Patricia said. And then I had 32 years of data, Marcus said. And then you had something to work with. Chapter 13, The Other Growers. In November 2019, Patricia Alvarez met with the 3 bench position growers who had been converting their heirloom varieties to low-chill alternatives on the Extension Service's recommendation. The meetings were not comfortable. 2 of the 3 growers had already removed approximately 30% of their heirloom pear acreage and replanted with the low-chill varieties. The trees that had been removed were gone. The replanting was 3 years into a 5-year establishment period. The conversions could not be undone. The third grower, a woman named Dorothy Graves who had been farming the east side bench for 30 years and who had been the most reluctant of the 3 to follow the conversion recommendation, had converted only her lowest bench blocks, preserving the upper bench heirlooms pending what she described as a few more years of data. I knew the valley floor model didn't feel right for my position, Dorothy said, in the November meeting. I've been watching the cold air drainage on my bench for 30 years. My observations were consistent with Webb's thermocouple data, but I didn't have the documentation to make the argument. The argument is now documented, Patricia said. The OSU addendum provides the framework for a site-specific assessment for your bench position. 3 years too late for the blocks I already converted, Dorothy said. Yes, Patricia said. I understand that. Dorothy looked at her. I don't think you made a bad recommendation, she said. The valley floor data was what you had. The bench-specific data wasn't in any form you could use. The bench-specific data was in Marcus Webb's thermocouple stations, Patricia said. I had seen it in 3 visits. I classified it as local supplementary data rather than using it to revise the model baseline. What's the difference? Dorothy said. In my training, Patricia said, site-specific data supplements the model. I hadn't encountered a case where the site-specific data was systematic enough to revise the model's baseline assumption. Marcus has been collecting systematic site-specific data for 32 years, Dorothy said. I know that now, Patricia said. I knew it then. I didn't know how to use it. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. What do I do with the blocks I have left? She said. The upper bench blocks, Patricia said, have a viable window consistent with the revised projection. Maintain the heirlooms on those blocks through the planning horizon the site-specific model shows. Use the premium revenue from those years to fund the transition of the lower blocks on a schedule that matches the revised threshold crossing dates. The Webb strategy, Dorothy said. The Webb strategy, Patricia said. Which is only possible because Webb had 32 years of thermocouple data to build it on. I don't have 32 years of data, Dorothy said. You have 0 years, Patricia said. Which is why we're installing a thermocouple station at your upper bench next spring. Chapter 14, Clara's Second Accounting. Clara Webb sat at the kitchen table in December 2019 and did the second accounting, not of what had been lost or preserved, but of what the 32 years of thermocouple data had been worth. Not to the Webb orchard specifically. To the valley. She had been thinking about this since the climate meeting in February, since the frost event in April, since Patricia's November calls to the 3 converting growers. She had been thinking about what it meant that Marcus's thermocouple data, collected without any institutional support, without any research funding, without any particular intention of building a regional dataset, had turned out to be the piece of information that revised the Extension Service's recommendation for 12 bench position orchards in the valley. The financial implications for the 3 converting growers who had received the revised recommendation after partial conversions, she estimated the foregone premium revenue at approximately $890,000 each, averaged across the blocks already converted and the years of premium production those blocks would have produced. For the 5 remaining heirloom operations at bench positions, the revised recommendation meant maintaining the premium window for 10 to 12 additional years beyond what the valley floor model had shown. She estimated the combined preserved premium at approximately $12 million to $16 million across the 5 operations. For the 7 operations that had already fully converted on the valley floor timeline, she could not calculate this. The conversions were done. The heirlooms were gone. She wrote at the bottom of the second accounting. The value of 32 years of systematic, site-specific thermocouple monitoring, approximately $12 to $16 million in preserved premium production for the 5 remaining heirloom operations at bench positions, plus the revised guidance for future management decisions. The cost of the monitoring, approximately $18 over 32 years in equipment, calibration, and data management. The $18 investment produced at least $12 million in identifiable value for the valley's remaining heirloom operations, plus an unknown amount in value for the 7 operations that converted before the data was incorporated into the recommendation. What the monitoring cost in time and attention, 47 years of Marcus walking to 4 thermocouple stations and reading them and recording what they showed. This is not separable from the other 47 years of Marcus walking his orchard and reading it. The thermocouple monitoring is one component of an integrated practice that treats every block as an individual subject deserving of systematic observation. The lesson is not that thermocouple monitoring is valuable, though it is. The lesson is that systematic, long-term, site-specific observation produces knowledge that regional models cannot contain, and that the value of that knowledge is not visible until the moment when it matters. She showed this to Marcus. He read it. Harold chose this bench because he read the valley, he said. Not because he had a model. He built the model, Clara said. Block by block. Year by year. And then my father added the thermocouple, Marcus said. And then you had 32 years of data, Clara said. And then the valley had something to work with. Part 5, What continued? Chapter 15, The Spring of 2020. The spring of 2020 brought 2 things to the Hood River Valley simultaneously: the pandemic that shut down the restaurant and specialty grocery markets that were the primary buyers for the valley's premium pears, and a late frost event on May 3rd that was the most damaging in the valley in 15 years. The frost was not in the forecast. Not specifically, the Weather Service had issued a general frost advisory for the region, but the predicted minimum of 34 degrees at the valley floor was below the damage threshold for the late-stage bloom that the valley's orchards were carrying. Marcus had been watching the conditions for 3 days. What he had been watching was the specific configuration of weather systems that produced the strongest cold air drainage events on the Underwood Bench, a high-pressure cell to the east pushing dry, cold continental air into the region, combined with the calm, clear nights that allowed radiation cooling to proceed without wind to mix the temperature inversion. He had seen this configuration 5 times in 47 years. 3 of those 5 had produced damaging frost events on the bench when the valley floor had stayed above the damage threshold. He activated the wind machines on the night of May 2nd. The valley floor minimum on May 3rd, 34 degrees. No damage on the valley floor. The upper bench without wind machine protection, estimated from the thermocouple reading with correction, 29 degrees. The critical temperature for late bloom stage bosque, 28 degrees. 1 degree of margin, again. The camise block, which was further from the wind machine coverage and which Marcus had expanded the machine sweep to protect, was at 29 degrees, 1 degree above the critical threshold for its bloom stage. He drove the orchard at first light. Clean. He drove to the valley floor orchard below, which had been at 34 degrees and well above the damage threshold. He noted in his notebook, May 3rd frost event. Valley floor, 34 degrees Fahrenheit, no damage. Upper bench estimated without machines, 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Machine activation, May 2nd, 11:30 p.m., based on 3-day weather pattern analysis consistent with strong cold air drainage events in 1977, 1988, 1994, 2003, 2011. All 5 events produced upper bench temperatures 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit below valley floor under these conditions. This event, within predicted range. Activation successful. He also noted, 2020 pandemic market disruption. Premium channel disrupted, restaurant closures eliminated approximately 35% of premium volume. Direct-to-consumer channel stable. See Clara's financial analysis. Clara's financial analysis was in a separate ledger, as it always was. Chapter 16, Dorothy Graves. Dorothy Graves called Marcus in the spring of 2021, after her first full year of thermocouple data had accumulated. She had installed the station in April 2020, using the protocol that Patricia had developed from Marcus's system. The station was at her upper bench position, 40 feet from her last surviving boss block. "My first year of data," she said. "I wanted to ask you something." "Ask," he said. "My chilling accumulation this year, 891 hours, she said. The valley floor station, 738 hours. My advantage, 153 hours. That's consistent with the Webb bench advantage, Marcus said. Maybe slightly higher. My bench aspect is northwest rather than your north-northeast, she said. The cold air from the upper slope hits my bench at a slightly different angle. I think it pulls a little more efficiently on my lower bench. What does the 153-hour advantage mean for your boss blocks? Marcus said. It means I'm well above the minimum threshold this year, she said. My BOSC is looking uniform in development, the bud break is consistent across the block. It will be, Marcus said. 891 hours is well above the BOSC threshold. The question is what happens in a low chilling year. How do I know when I have a low chilling year before it's too late to manage for it? She said. You track the accumulation weekly through November and December, Marcus said. By the end of December you have approximately 70% of your final chilling accumulation for the season. If you're running significantly below the prior year's December accumulation, you adjust your management. Adjust how? She said. Hydrogen cyanamide application to supplement chilling, Marcus said. It's an approved dormancy break agent. I use it on the lower bench blocks in years when the chilling is running short. It's not a perfect substitute for natural chilling, but it maintains the bloom uniformity above what you'd get without it. You have experience applying it in which years? She said. I have 9 years where I applied it to the lower bench blocks, he said. 7 of the 9 years, the bloom uniformity was maintained within the commercial acceptable range. 2 years, the application wasn't sufficient to prevent some erratic bloom. What was different about the 2 years it wasn't sufficient? She said. Marcus thought about this. He had been thinking about this for years. What distinguished the years when the cyanamide worked from the years when it didn't? The variety response is not uniform, he said. Camise responds better to hydrogen cyanamide than BOSC. In years where the chilling deficit was primarily in the BOSC block rather than the Camise block, the cyanamide worked less well. So the variety-specific chilling deficit matters, not just the total hours, she said. Yes, he said. The variety threshold is not a single number, it's a range, and within that range the specific chilling pattern matters. How many hours below 35 degrees versus between 35 and 45 degrees? The deep chill is more effective than the marginal chill. I need to track the temperature distribution within the chilling range, she said. Not just the total hours. Yes, he said. I added that tracking in 2001. I can send you the template. Thank you, she said. There was a pause. Marcus, she said. Yes, he said. How many years before I know what you know about my bench? She said. He thought about the honest answer. For the chilling accumulation patterns, 10 years of data gives you a reasonably reliable distribution to plan from, he said. For the frost event prediction, the cold air drainage behavior in specific weather configurations, that takes longer. I know my 5 strong drainage configurations because I've seen them over 47 years. You'll see them too, over time. What if one of them occurs before I've seen it? She said. You call me, he said. That's what we're doing right now. Chapter 17, Clara's Third Accounting. Clara Webb sat at the kitchen table in November 2021 and did the accounting of the transition. Marcus was 75 years old. He was walking the orchard every morning, the way he had been walking it for 47 years, and the walking was still possible. The lower blocks required less elevation change and he managed the upper blocks from the truck on the steepest mornings. The orchard was running. The lower blocks, the 3 blocks that they had planted to the new lower chill premium Anjou cross in 2019, as the first phase of the transition strategy, were 3 years into their establishment. The young trees were growing well on the bench's deep soil. The upper bench blocks, the bosque and camise that Marcus had been managing through the climate projections and the frost events in the 47 years of observation, were producing at their normal premium level. The accounting showed, the 3 converted lower blocks had cost approximately $340 in establishment investment and would produce their first commercial crop in 2 years. The remaining upper bench heirlooms were producing approximately $580 in annual premium revenue. The direct-to-consumer channel that Clara had built over 15 years was generating $210 of that, at the highest margin in the operation. She also tracked something that did not appear in the financial records, the number of growers who had called Marcus in the past 2 years with questions about their bench position orchards. 12. In 2 years, 12 growers from Hood River and neighboring Wasco County had called Marcus to ask about cold air drainage behavior, thermocouple data interpretation, frost prediction, and the bench-specific climate projection methodology. Of the 12, 9 had installed thermocouple stations using Patricia's protocol. 3 were in the process of installing. The protocol is spreading, she said to Marcus, showing him the count. Patricia has been presenting it at every grower meeting since 2019, he said. The protocol came from your data, she said. The protocol came from my father's decision to install the first thermocouple in 1971, he said. I maintained it. Patricia developed it into a transmissible form. And Harold chose the bench in 1924 because he read the valley for 4 years and understood something that no model had captured yet, Clara said. And Harold's reading is why we have 47 years of data from this specific bench, Marcus said. The data didn't come from nowhere. It came from him choosing correctly in 1924. Clara looked at the accounting on the table. She looked at the number of growers who had called. She looked at the 3 young trees visible in the lower bench through the November kitchen window, the first generation of the transition that the thermocouple data had made possible on an informed schedule. She wrote at the bottom of the November accounting. Harold Webb chose the Underwood bench in 1924 by reading what the valley told him. His reading was correct. The correctness of the reading has compounded for 97 years. What Harold read with his eyes in his 4 years of watching, Marcus has been measuring with thermocouples for 47 years. The measurement confirmed the reading. The measurement allowed the reading to be transmitted, to Patricia, to Dorothy, to the 12 growers who called. The lesson is, reading without measurement eventually becomes anecdote. Measurement without reading is just numbers. The Webb orchard has both, because 3 generations maintain both. Chapter 18, The Morning Walk. Marcus Webb walked the upper bench on the first clear morning of March 2022, which was his 48th consecutive spring walking this orchard. He was 76 years old. His knees were slower than they had been in 2019 and the upper bench required more care on the steepest section, but the walk was possible and he intended to keep it possible. The orchard in March was dormant wood and bare soil and the specific information that Bud Stage carried about the winter that had passed and the spring that was coming. He stopped at the boss block first. He looked at the bud stage on the first tree. He walked to the thermocouple station. Current season chilling hours, 937. He noted this in his notebook. 937 was above the minimum threshold. The bosque would have uniform bloom this spring. He walked the full upper bench, the boss block, the camise block, the old seckel planting that his grandfather had put in the northeast corner in 1931 and that was still producing fruit that commanded the highest per pound price in the operation. He noted the bud stage at each block. He noted the soil condition, the irrigation system status, the presence of the specific lichen colonies on the frost-damaged limbs that told him something about the winter temperature distribution that the thermocouple data confirmed in numbers. He noted what he saw. Not everything he saw, most of what he saw did not require a notebook. It required the reference library that 48 years of walking this specific orchard had built, and that library was in him. Clara met him at the end of the seckel block. Dorothy called this morning, she said. Her chilling accumulation is 903 hours. First year she's cleared the threshold convincingly. Good year for her, he said. She asked whether you thought the bloom would be uniform, Clara said. At 903 hours in a normal March, Marcus said, her bosque should bloom uniformly. The question is whether we get a frost event in late April with the configuration I've been watching in the forecast. She asked about that too, Clara said. She said the pattern looks familiar from your descriptions. The high-pressure configuration from the east, Marcus said. I've seen it produce strong drainage events in 4 out of the past 5 years it's appeared in March to April. She should watch her minimum temperatures on the clear nights starting the 3rd week of April. I'll call her, Clara said. They walked back down the bench together, through the dormant orchard, past the young trees in the lower blocks that were 4 years into their establishment and beginning to show the lateral development that preceded productive cropping. The young trees are looking good, Marcus said. 2 more years to first commercial crop, Clara said. 3, for the best quality, he said. You'll be 79, she said. Harold was 72 when the first blocks he planted started producing consistently, he said. He farmed them for another 19 years after that. You have time, Clara said. I have the time I have, Marcus said. Which is the same time everyone has. The question is what you do with it. He stopped at the edge of the orchard, at the point where the bench dropped away toward the valley below, where he could see the full sweep of the Hood River Valley in the March morning light, the Columbia River visible to the north, the orchards and vineyards and remaining native vegetation of the valley spread out below. Harold stood here in 1924, he said. He looked at this bench and decided this was the right place. How did he know? Clara said. He watched the frost patterns in the valley below for 4 years, Marcus said. He saw that the cold air settled in the lower areas on clear nights. He saw that the bench above was less affected. He chose the bench. He chose correctly, Clara said. He chose with the data he had, Marcus said. Which was 4 years of watching. And then he spent 31 years collecting more data. And then my father spent 17 years collecting more data. And then I spent 48 years collecting more data. And then Patricia had something to work with, Clara said. And then Dorothy had something to work with, Marcus said. And then the 12 growers had something to work with. And then whoever comes after them will have something to work with. He looked at the valley. Harold chose this bench, he said. The bench is still here. The cold air still drains off the upper slopes on clear nights. The thermocouples are still recording it. The data is still accumulating. The data compounds, Clara said. The data compounds, he said. That's the nature of long observation. Every year adds to what you know. You never know everything. You know more each year. He turned from the valley and walked back into the orchard. There was work to do. Epilogue, The Bosque Block, March 2025. Marcus Webb drove to the upper bench on the first clear morning of March 2025 in the same way he had driven to the upper bench on the first clear morning of March for 51 consecutive years. He was 79 years old. He drove rather than walked the steepest section of the bench now, and Clara came with him on the first assessment of each year because the thermocouple readings and the bud stage assessments were the 2 inputs to the spring management plan and she had been part of making that plan for 49 years. He stopped at the Bosque Block. He looked at the bud stage. He walked to the thermocouple station. Current season chilling hours, 962. Good year, he said. Clara noted it in the ledger. 962 hours against the Bosque threshold of 900 to 1. Well within the viable range. The block looked healthy. The buds were at the stage that 48 springs on this bench had taught him to read, not at a threshold, not at risk, at the productive center of the range. He stood in the Bosque Block for a while, in the March morning, looking at what 48 springs of reading had given him the ability to see. Then he drove to the lower blocks, where the young Anjou cross trees were in their 6th year of establishment and producing their second full commercial crop. The fruit last year had sold well. Clara had placed it with 3 of the premium buyers who had been buying the heirloom Bosque for 15 years, and the feedback had been positive, not the same as Bosque, but premium quality with a premium price. The transition was working. Patricia Alvarez had sent him a copy of the paper she had published in the Journal of Agricultural Meteorology in January, Microclimate Heterogeneity in Orchard Districts, the role of cold air drainage and chilling accumulation variability and implications for climate adaptation planning. The paper used the Webb thermocouple data, the Dorothy Graves data, and the data from 7 other bench position installations as the empirical foundation for a regional assessment of cold air drainage's role in buffering the climate change signal in Pacific Northwest orchard districts. The paper was well received. Patricia had called it the most useful thing she had done in 5 years at the Extension Service. Marcus had sent her a copy of Harold's original field notes from 1921 to 1924, the 4 years of watching before the first tree was planted. The notes described what Harold had seen in the valley during those years, the frost patterns, the cold air movements on clear nights, the specific observations that had led him to choose the underwood bench. The notes were in pencil, in the slightly irregular handwriting of a man who had grown up farming rather than writing, on the backs of the pages of a used account book. Patricia had called when she received them. "These are the foundation of everything," she said. "Harold chose the bench because he watched the valley," Marcus said. "The watching came before the planting. The planting came before the data. The data came before the protocol. The protocol is what other people can use." "The chain," Patricia said. "The chain," Marcus said. He hung up and walked to the edge of the bench and looked at the valley below, the same view Harold had stood at in 1924, the Columbia River visible to the north, the orchard spread out on the bench behind him, the morning light moving across the valley floor. The thermocouples were recording. The data was accumulating. The chain continued. Author's note. The Hood River Valley of Oregon is real, one of the premier fruit-growing districts in the United States, known particularly for Bosc, Anjou, and Bartlett pears and for its complex microclimate produced by the Columbia River Gorge topography. The valley has experienced significant agricultural change over the past 20 years, including conversion of pear acreage to wine grapes and other crops. The climate projections for Pacific Northwest tree fruit production, including concerns about declining chilling hour accumulation due to climate warming, are real and are the subject of active research and extension programming at Oregon State University and Washington State University. The PNW Climate Toolbox is a real resource used by agricultural advisors in the region. Cold air drainage and complex topographic landscapes, the flow of dense cold air down slopes and its pooling in valley bottoms and on topographic benches, is a well-documented meteorological phenomenon. Its role in producing microclimatic heterogeneity in fruit-growing districts, including chilling hour variation, is documented in the scientific literature. Heirloom pear varieties, Bosc, Camise, Seckel, Anjou in its traditional form, are real varieties with specific chilling requirements that distinguish them from newer low-chill commercial varieties. The premium fresh market for heirloom pears is real and commands significant price premiums over commodity production. Thermocouple monitoring for block-level temperature recording is a real practice in commercial orcharding, though the systematic 32-year dataset described in this novel is fictional. Marcus Webb, Clara Webb, Harold Webb, Robert Webb, Patricia Alvarez, Dorothy Graves, and all other characters are fictional. The Hood River Valley is real. Clara's calculation is fictional. The arithmetic it represents is not.